This is Big Podcast.
I have done a lot of things in the entertainment industry. One of them music. I've worked with comics. I've done film and TV. I've worked with a lot of book authors. I've been a book author. I am a book author. And there are a lot of parallels. And one of the things that I think is funny when I'm talking about one thing and wanting you to transpose it, some people will say, "You're talking about Buicks. I sell Cadillacs." It's like, I'm going to ask you to work with me here when I talk about transposing. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. If you have a podcast, I'm going to help you grow it. I'm going to help you get more people to it. I'm going to help you make it better. Make a podcast that people care about. Make a podcast that people spread, tell their friends about. Make a podcast that makes you money. My name is David Hooper. BigPodcast.com is the website. This is the audio edition of my weekly newsletter. That comes out every Friday morning, New York City time. If you go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com, you can find all the links. You can see everything in writing, and you can get this via email yourself. Here's what's in this issue. AC/DC in podcasting. How I sold 50,000 copies of my self-published book. Just to be clear, this is going to apply to you as a podcaster. Podcasts get political. Just to be clear, this is going to apply to you even if you're not political. Why am I so tired? Part 2. This guy is doing video right. This is also going to apply to you, even if you're not doing video at all. Also, some classified ads, things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make money with your podcast, the things that this podcast is about. This episode of Build a Big Podcast is brought to you by Riverside.fm, a virtual studio that makes recording and editing podcasts the highest quality possible, accessible to anyone, even you. You've heard me talk about Riverside a lot, and you've heard me talk about probably the same elements of Riverside, but they're adding new things all the time. I want to talk about some things that you might not be aware of. Of course, you know about studio quality recordings anywhere. Of course, you know about their multi-track recording ability, text-based video editing. What you may not know about is a silence remover and filler word removal. It's AI-powered. It's going to make your editing much quicker. Magic clips, I've talked about this. AI-powered highlights. If you're doing video, looking for the short clips, things that are good for social media, this is a great way to do it. It is automated and AI-powered. You can do live streaming and have audience interaction. Remember old school radio? People used to call in, "Hey, could you play this song?" You can do that with Riverside if you're playing music. Or you could just talk to somebody. Whatever you want. Again, Riverside.fm is adding new features all the time. If you haven't checked it out for a while, do it. You can do that for free. They're going to give you a couple of hours. Riverside.fm is the website. You can go there, get a couple of hours, do a couple of interviews maybe. Take a look, put it through the paces, see how it works for you. If you want to stick around, I've got a discount code for you. It's going to get you 15% off. The discount code, Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. Go to Riverside.fm, get that couple of hours for free. See how you like it. If you want to stick around, 15% off with the discount code Big Podcast, BIGPODCAST. You heard me mention AC/DC. You know AC/DC? They've done a lot of music. It's very similar. You say, have I heard this song? Maybe not. It's the other song. Okay. Anyway, this podcast episode, kind of similar to that because everything is about podcasting. It may be confusing to you when I go from thing to thing to thing because all of them are about podcasting. All of them about growing your podcast, making a podcast that sounds better, making a podcast that attracts people, making a podcast so good that people spread it for you and miss it if it's gone. Because of that, I'm going to make it easy on you. When I switch from thing to thing to thing, you're going to hear this sound. That's how you know if you want more information. You can go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com to get all the links, see everything in writing, get more commentary on the topic. That's newsletter.bigpodcast.com. You ready? Here we go. AC/DC and podcasting. Angus Young of AC/DC once famously said, "I'm sick to death of people saying we've made 11 albums that sound exactly the same. In fact, we made 12 albums that sound exactly the same." AC/DC can get away with that because they are very good at what they do. And unlike podcasters, they're only releasing new material every few years. In 51 years, they've released 18 albums. And that has slowed down as they've gotten into, 35, 40 years. You slow down as you get older. Some podcasters release 18 episodes a month. So doing something that's exactly the same, that can be a risk. We all get into ruts. This coming week, I've got something that's going to help you break out of any podcasting ruts that you've got. I've got something that's going to make you feel more empowered, more confident. If you want to be the first to hear about it, there are a couple of ways to do that. You can go to bigpodcast.com. I've got a mailing list. It is a very low volume mailing list. I do not send to it nearly as much as I should. You can go to newsletter.bigpodcast.com and get the newsletter, the one that I'm talking about all the time on these episodes. Or if you're not subscribed to this podcast yet, go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I've got 3 ways for you to do that. One for iPhone, one for Android, one is an RSS feed. I will get you this announcement. You're going to want to jump in with me and the other podcasters that are doing this. I'm very excited about it. I've done something like this before, but never in this way, never with this kind of interaction. And interaction is powerful. I mentioned earlier, Riverside.fm, they've got that interactive element. You can actually have people call in. We're going to call it call, but it's through the internet. Call in through the internet and talk to you as you're recording your podcast. This is how you build community. And I've got a community of podcasters. I'd like you to be a part of it. We're going to get better together. Until then, do sign up for something. Go to bigpodcast.com, get on the mailing list, or if you want to, subscribe to this podcast. You will never miss an episode, and you can get off at any time. Either one of these things. Big Podcast AMP. That stands for Audio Monetization Program. If you like this podcast, if you're getting the written version of the newsletter, you like that, you are going to love Big Podcast AMP. It's a personal coaching program. You will be working with me. I'm going to help you do 3 things. 1, grow your podcast audience. 2, get people talking about your podcast. And 3, make more money with your podcast and your podcasting skills. If you can talk, if you can edit, if you can publish, the things that you do with your podcast, there are people that are willing to pay you for those services. I'm going to help you make some money. You can get the details at bigpodcast.com/amp. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. How I sold 20,000 copies of my self-published book. I haven't talked numbers of the books that I have sold, but I will tell you this. It is more than this guy has sold. It should be, because I've been doing it for 25 years. I've got more than one book, and I show up every day and I promote the book. You've heard me talk about it here. One of them, it's a book called Big Podcast. You can go to bigpodcast.com/books if you're interested in these. I've got another one. It's episode templates to help you come up with content for your podcast. That one right now, 99 cents on Amazon. So it's pretty easy when you've got a price like 99 cents on Amazon. You've got audiobooks that are available free via Audible with the trial. It's pretty easy to rack up some good numbers if you were out promoting, especially if you've been like me, promoting for 25 years. However, some people, they knock it out of the park with one book, maybe their first book. And this guy has done that. It's a 13-minute video. I've got it linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. I want to sum it up for you. Talk it over with you as somebody who's done it in the book space, but also somebody as a podcaster that can give you some advice from what this dude is doing to help you with your podcast. So let's talk about the big takeaways. When you release something, it can have a significant impact on your life, both financially and personally. I think we all know at the beginning of a project that this could be the thing that brings us money, that gets us publicity, that gets our cause out to the world, spreads a message. But if you've done it for a while, like I said, I've been doing it for 25 years, you're kind of like, not everything we release is going to get that kind of traction. Or maybe you've never done it and you think, well, that works for other people, but it's not going to work for me. I'm just going to release it anyway. It can and will happen for you if you stick it out long enough. This particular launch, again, 50,000 copies sold. It was not a big launch. Few people knew this dude. Things were slow during the first few months, but he kept at it. He built momentum using what he had, and he stacked upon that. When I mentioned the books that I've written and published, we're talking 25 years. That's a long time. But again, if you keep showing up, if you do it long enough, you're going to have some success, maybe some quick success. I didn't have podcasting when I put up my first book. Podcasting is huge for building an audience. And not only an audience of book buyers, but also an audience of people who already listen to podcasts. If you're going out on another podcast and being a guest co-host maybe, an expert, maybe producing a syndicated segment that you give to other podcasts, I mentioned the book that I'd done, 101 episode templates. Those are segments that you can syndicate to other podcasts. It's not necessarily a full-on episode. These are ways for you to get connected with other people. Every one of them is like a little advertisement for you saying, hey, come back to my main podcast, or hey, come buy my book, or hey, come hire me as a speaker. This stuff adds up, but it doesn't just happen. You have to go to it and bring the people in to you. When this author got positive feedback from readers, he would engage with them via social media. Talked about the interactivity with something like Riverside.fm, where people can talk to you on your podcast as if it's a call-in radio show. We can do the same thing via social media. Too many of us, they're like me right now, sitting in a recording studio, glorified, tricked out closet, just yapping, not asking for interactivity. When people come to us, not responding to those people. Don't be like that. Have those conversations. If you look at the newsletter, newsletter.bigpodcast.com, one of the things that you will see is I say, reach out to me. I'm on Mastodon, Blue Sky, and Threads. You reach out to me, I'm going to respond to you. Are you doing that? That's a way to grow your podcast audience. It's a way to sell books. It works both ways. Like I said, all these can be transposed. Almost anything somebody's doing for books can be done for your podcast. He talks about collaboration with influencers like podcasters, like you being a guest on other podcasts. That allowed him to borrow existing audiences and significantly boost sales. Audiences are already built by other people. Can you help those other people? And it's doing the things that I just said. Going and being a guest on other podcasts, writing articles that go out in newsletters or are posted on other people's blogs, offering a segment that will help that person's audience. It's doable. You got to do the work, but it's not that tough. It's enjoyable. Let's talk about the numbers. 10,000 books sold in 2022 and nearly 35,000 in 2023. This is momentum building. Stacking upon stacking upon stacking. That's how this thing happens. It gets bigger if you continue to go out and promote it. More people have read your book in 2023 than 22 in this case. So if you've got a good book or a good podcast in your case, more people are talking about it. Most people don't want something, and we think we want this, that is huge the first week and it fizzles out. Because we don't think like that at all. We think, oh, it's going to be huge the first week and it's going to continue to build. No, not necessarily. A slow burn is what I call this. It is much better for you to get it together as you go, building as you go along, let people feel part of that and come along with you. People want to see you succeed. Your listeners are in it with you. Bring them in. That's why you're having these conversations. Ask them, what should I do in this case? You're the leader. You don't have to follow what they're saying, but do ask them. Have those conversations. They will give you some great ideas. 61% of sales came through Amazon. And this is very similar for podcasters because, look, I don't know your podcast, but let me tell you where your downloads are coming from. They're coming from Apple Podcast or Spotify. It used to be the Apple Podcast was way more than everybody else. Nowadays, especially if your podcast skews a younger audience, it could be Spotify. But I guarantee it's one of those two things, Apple Podcast or Spotify. Why is that? Apple Podcast is attached to iPhone. A lot of people, especially in the United States, have an iPhone. Spotify attached everywhere. If you're a podcaster, it's easy to think, yeah, I listen to it for music, but it sucks for podcasting. It does. But non-podcasters don't know that. They like your podcast. They've never experienced something better. So go where they are. 24% of sales have been the audiobook version. It's another parallel for podcasters. That's a huge opportunity for podcasters because audio is audio. As a matter of fact, if you look at the new Spotify memberships, the subscriptions they are offering, and if you've had one for a long time, you're probably on this. They've raised the prices and included audiobooks. You get a little bit cheaper if you don't want the audiobooks. I think for me, I had a family plan or something, I don't know, $3 more to get audiobooks. Worth it? Maybe. Audible is a better listening experience, but don't think like that. You and I know it. Most people don't. Most people love Spotify. It is not our job to get somebody who's happy listening on Spotify and listening on Spotify over to a different application, a different distribution platform. It doesn't matter. Are they listening to our stuff? Are they enjoying it? Yeah. Let's let them have Spotify. Reasons to stay independent. I love this because so many podcasters come to me They say, David, I want a syndicated show, or David, I want to work with a network. Do you? Listen to this. While traditional publishers have access to broader markets, self-published authors, these are book authors, but again, everything's applied to your podcast here. Self-published authors maintain greater control over their pricing and royalties. If you want to take something down, take it down. If you want to put something up, put it up. If you want a certain guest, interview that guest. If the guest does something stupid, remove it. I've talked about that on here. Sometimes you have a guest and you just don't want to be associated with that guest anymore. You didn't know going in what an idiot they were. Not as easy when you're on a network. People say, oh, no, that gets a lot of downloads. We can't remove that. You don't want to be associated with somebody, you remove it. You do want to be associated with somebody, bring that person in. Despite traditional publishers offering significant money up front, this author had, I think it was $100,000. It might have been a little bit more than that. He said no. He made more money and had more control overall. Again, slow burn. You might remember Alanis Morissette. And actually, probably about that same time, maybe a little bit more recent, Jewel had this same deal. Those artists did not take a big advance on their record albums. With Alanis, people thought, who cares? I don't know if you know this about Alanis Morissette, but in the United States, she's known as this rageful, angsty teenager. You ought to know. You should know what I want. She was a teen queen in Canada doing pop music. People kind of wrote her off here. No, nobody's going to buy this. They're all going to know that. Well, they did buy it. They bought a ton of it. And because she hadn't had a great advance and she was able to get a bigger percentage of that album, she ended up making a lot more money than she would have had she had a bigger advance. Bigger advance, yeah, it's nice. But almost always, if you've got something really great and you've got momentum, it is better to have ownership of it. If you got the marketing skills, and if you're a podcaster like you are, and you've got that distribution, you can go directly to people. We are at a pivotal point in how we are looking at podcasts. I'm going to get into that in just a second. Before I do, I've already talked about Big Podcast AMP, the audio monetization program, working with me personally to get more people to your podcast, help you build a business around your podcast, make money with your podcast. Bigpodcast.com/AMP. That's bigpodcast.com/AMP. Go there if you're interested in talking more about working together. More thoughts on this? Newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 202. Podcasts get political. Call Her Daddy. I have not listened to Call Her Daddy for a while. However, what I've been talking about on this episode, these short clips, I saw a bunch of them over the last week because Call Her Daddy did an episode with Kamala Harris, and there are clips all over. Call Her Daddy, though, I will give him credit. It's been interesting to watch. When I listened to it, it had two people, canned one of them, and Alex, what is her last name? Anyway, the blonde Alex, the brunette, Sophia Franklin. She started a podcast called Sophia with an F. It seems to kind of died out. I mean, it's big, but not compared to Call Her Daddy. Call Her Daddy has about 5 million listeners every episode. Or that's what they're saying. Many of them, younger women. Many of those younger women, not politically active. Call Her Daddy is changing with its audience. She's kind of sneaking things in on them. So it's not this kind of dumbed down hypersexual content that it might have been a couple years ago. I say might have been. You make the judgment on that. Look, I'm a 52-year-old white guy, not my audience. So I'm not making a judgment against it and saying it was like stupid or, but it wasn't for me. However, I'm interested when they have somebody like Kamala Harris on, because that shows that podcasters and podcasting is getting bigger and, more importantly, more respected in the traditional media environment. Here's the deal, and this is why Kamala Harris went on Call Her Daddy. The election is tight. It is statistically tied in current polling. And most people, you're one of them, I would imagine, you've already decided on who you're voting for, and nothing is going to change your mind. That means for a candidate to break that tie and pull ahead, that candidate has to get non-voters to vote. Who listens to Call Her Daddy? Younger women, maybe not as politically active as some. And that's not to say that it's women That's to say that younger people simply not as political active as older people. They're moving around, they're in school, they're traveling. They're just not that engaged. But if you talk to them, if you tell them why to care, maybe they will be. By the way, Donald Trump is doing something similar. He's targeting males on podcasts. It's a podcast called This Past Weekend, Theo Vaughn. It's here in Nashville. Although I'm pretty sure Theo went to New York to do this. That's usually how these bigger guests work, especially when there's security involved. You go to them. Regardless, the point is this. People are looking at podcasts as real media. This is not just new media. This is real media. It's effective media. This younger audience that I'm talking about, men and women, they are not going to the traditional news sources of our parents and grandparents. You can't just throw money on a TV ad and a newspaper ad and expect to get your message out to people. If you remember the Obama campaign, this was 2012? 2008 maybe? There was a video game, and I don't remember which one it was. Maybe Grand Theft Auto, something like this, some kind of driving game. And one of the things the Obama campaign did, and people thought that was genius for them to do this, there were billboards within the game. Imagine a driving game, and there's billboards just like you would see a billboard along the side of the highway. It's in the video game. Vote Obama. They put some Obama billboards up. Genius. Got that younger demographic out. This is the same thing, but it's a little bit different than a billboard because it's not a slogan. Vote for Obama. A candidate, Trump, Kamala, whoever the candidate is, talking to those people about things they care about. This Call Her Daddy interview. And again, I've seen the clips, not the whole thing, but I'm imagining she's not really going deep into the economy or international politics or drilling oil, fracking, whatever. She's talking about female issues because female issues such as healthcare, abortion rights, that affects her audience. She's talking about the issues that affect her audience. Theo Vaughn, who knows? He's a comic. He may be doing the same thing. I've got this stuff linked. If you're interested, you can find it at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. But one more thing before I go on to the next thing. People ask me this, should I get political on my podcast? And I'm going to tell you, it is a risk. People pick sides. We're very tribal right now. My first rule of podcasting is to fly your flag. So if you have a podcast for women, or if you have a podcast for young men maybe, and you think there's some issue that young men need to be worried about, okay, good. Fly that flag. But if it's not in your wheelhouse, and if you're not normally talking about those things, maybe not. I'm mentioning politics, if you want to call it that here, because we are in the media business. And these people who are running for president, they are using podcasting to get their message out. That is important for us as podcasters. It's important for our industry. What I'm not doing is telling you how to vote. What I'm not doing is getting deep into the issues that these guys care about or say they care about. This is not a political podcast, and you're probably in that situation. However, we keep hearing this is the most important election ever. Yeah, I would say so. The election that you're in right now is the most important election ever because you're in it. So if you think you need to jump in, just be aware of the risk. I've got more thoughts on this at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 202. Why am I so tired? Part 2. There's a part 1 a few issues ago. Does this sound familiar to you? A cycle, an endless cycle of producing a podcast, especially if you're doing a daily release, but even a weekly release. Despite the fatigue, you got to get back to work. There's another episode to get out. Always more content to create, more edits to make, another deadline looming. I've been in the content creation business since the 90s. Not in the creator space. I think that's such a funny word. The one that everybody's talking about these days, creators, like it's something new. No. Musicians, man. We were doing this a long time ago. Writers, doing it a long time ago. Comics, doing it a long time ago. Film and TV, doing it a long time ago. We've done it a long, long time. This is not a new business. And I've been in it for a while. And I've learned two things during this time. One is that there are always some people who will consume everything you do as soon as you release it and immediately be ready for more. I talked earlier about writing books, releasing books. Any author can relate to this. You spend 4 or 5 years on a book sometimes. You release it, somebody reads it over a week or two, maybe a weekend if it's really good. When's the next one coming out? It's going to be a minute. It's going to be a minute. I got to get out, promote this one, let other people know about it. Like I said, it's a building thing. 10,000 copies the first year, 20-something thousand copies the next year. That's how your podcast is. That's how a book is. That's how your career works if you're a musician or a comic or an actor. You build upon it. And it takes a minute. Still, you're working on something that might take an hour to consume, a couple of hours to consume, a weekend, a week or two to consume. And people are ready for more, and you're going to have some of those people. There are also those people who value your longevity over immediate output. This is most people. And I bring up this topic because I want you to know that most people care and understand that if you need to take a break or even just slow down a little bit, people who are listening to you want you to be able to continue to create. So if you are getting burnout and you're in this content creation cycle, and you can see the joke that I've got, I love putting jokes in these newsletters. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 202. You can see that joke, and I think you'll relate to it, but it's also a very serious thing. I want you to take a break, maybe a week, maybe a couple of days. We're coming up with some big holidays in the next couple of months. Thanksgiving in the United States, Canada, you got your Thanksgiving up there. Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. If you need the time off, take it off. I'll be talking about this more over the next few weeks because there's also an opportunity if you want to keep going because there's fewer content, so many people are taking off. There's an opportunity for you to jump in, become a habit for somebody because there's not that much content available during this time. They find you. They've got a new iPhone they got for Christmas. Look, there's an opportunity for you. We're going to talk about all of it, but I want you to take care of yourself. And if you want to see the joke, it's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 202. This guy is doing video right. He's not a podcaster. He's a comic. I've got him linked at newsletter.bigpodcast.com, issue number 202, if you want to see this video. He's been making a name for himself with short videos and even shorter jokes. The king of one-liners. He's been doing it for 40 years. This goes back to what I said earlier. Stacking on top of each other, building a reputation, building a story, building the talent that it takes to do one-liners or to do podcasts or to do books. But I love this guy's videos because, one, they're funny. And it is also something that I want you to think about as far as you doing videos. I talked earlier about Riverside.fm. Yes, this episode's sponsored by Riverside.fm. You don't have to use them to do this. Short clips for social media. However you do it. Test stuff out. See what people like. Use that for your longer form content. Then if you want to do longer form videos, yeah, go for it. But when it comes to TikTok, short is the way to go. YouTube shorts, even YouTube in general, short is the way to go. You might have an hour-long video. People skip through that. They look for the most popular elements. They look for timestamps. They're not going to listen to all of your stuff, watch all your stuff if they don't know you. You've got to build that relationship with them. And building that relationship is what I've talked about throughout this episode, having those conversations, listening to people, doing something that they're interested in that's helpful to them. I want you to see this guy's videos. He's doing them right. You could do something similar. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 202. By the way, his long video, 2.5 million views. Again, check it out, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. This is issue number 202. Classified ads for you, things that will help you to grow your podcast, get more people to your podcast, make money with your podcast, simplify your podcast production with NoteJoy, makes podcast production with guests, co-hosts, and producers easy. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, the time zones that you've got to deal with. You're going to be collaborating in real time with NoteJoy. It's going to make you feel like you're in the same room. I love it. I've been using it for, 5 or 7 years. I've got more information about it. You can try it for free at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Audio Pen, the easiest way to convert messy thoughts into clear text, including podcast outlines. There's an app. You hold the phone up to your mouth, you hit record, and you start rambling. I've got this idea for a podcast, and I think I can talk about this, and then I can talk about this, and maybe I'll talk about that. Whoops, wait a minute, add this to the intro. Okay, we're going to do the outro like that. You're going to bounce all around, do whatever you need to. AudioPen will figure it out. It can put everything in writing, give you a nice outline to work from when you're recording your podcast. After you're done recording your podcast, it can do the episode notes for you. It is a very powerful tool. You can try it for free. It's at newsletter.bigpodcast.com. Hey, thanks for listening to Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I want to make sure that you don't miss an episode, and here's how to do it. bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Go there now. There are 3 buttons, one for Android, one for iPhone. One gets you an RSS feed. Click the one that you want. Boom! From the Big Podcast supercomputer to your phone, to your desktop, whatever you want. It instantly happens. You can listen to every episode of Build a Big Podcast. When a new one comes out, I'll send it to you free. That's bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Again, thanks for listening to Build a Big Podcast. If you want to work together, there are a few ways we can do it. You can find me at bigpodcast.com. I will see you there, and I'll see you here on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.
This is the Big Podcast Supercomputer with behind-the-scenes info for podcasters. The original recording for this episode was 45 minutes and 2 seconds. Approximately 15 minutes of tape, roughly 1/3 of what was recorded, has been removed.